Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. I'm your host, Alex from TechnoBlock, and today we're talking about budgeting, job costing, estimating, and we're doing that with our friend Wes Zimmerman from SynkedUP, also affiliated with Tussey Landscaping. You may have seen them on Instagram, on YouTube. They have a great YouTube channel. Wes, thanks for joining us on the show, man.
Hey. It's great to be here. Thanks a lot. We're talking about the stuff that nobody wants to talk about.
Exactly. Super popular episode coming up, folks. But it's important. We have to make sure that that money's coming into our bank accounts and that at the end of the year there's enough left, that the business is healthy, it's profitable. We have paid ourselves, we've paid our suppliers, we've paid our employees, and we're ready to take on another year and keep growing. So, Wes, for those of our audience who don't know anything about you, can you give us a little background, and then we'll dive into the meat and potatoes here?
Yeah, so I started working for Tussey Landscaping when I was still in school. I was biking to work. It was 12 miles from my house, so that was kind of like my way to stay fit. Go work at a landscape job and bike to work two ways, morning and evening. But not doing that anymore, although I should be. But anyway, kind of grew up there at Tussey Landscaping in my work career. I started out as just a laborer and became a service technician and eventually was running a crew, then got into the marketing thing, you know, like with the YouTube channel and the Instagram and all of that. And it's been a great ride. Steve and Matt, the owners of Tussey Landscaping, have been fantastic people to work for, and they're essentially who I have to thank for everything I've ever been able to do in my career. So yeah, it's been great. I have a lot of experience with hardscaping and water features especially, and yeah, it's been a fun ride.
I want to ask a question, because a lot of people that we've had on the show, I would say almost exclusively from a contractor perspective, they've all been the owners and or founders of the businesses that they operate, and you're neither.
Yeah,
but you stuck around for 15 years, and you're still very involved. But now you have a new venture that you've started as well, which we'll talk about here in a second. But what goes through your head on a regular basis in that situation where so many people know that they can be successful if they go on their own? You clearly understand how to make the business successful, handling marketing responsibilities, handling financial responsibilities. I mean, you've built an app to help contractors understand the financial aspects of running a hardscape business that much better. So like, you're more than qualified to do it. Why was it better for you to stick around as an employee?
Yeah, it's $1 million question. So here we go into the labor shortage and employee tangent thing. But like, you know, and you see these questions on Facebook groups all the time, like industry Facebook groups with like, hey, you know, what do I do with my guys? What do I pay them? How do I, you know, or some people just kind of have this expectation that their best people are going to leave their company. And I cringe at that. Like, I never accept that. Like, I would never want to accept that if I owned the company. And like, I think the key is to the owner making it very plain and obvious and communicating this to their people that, look, my goal for you is to grow a career for you here. I don't want you for 5 years and then you leave and do your own thing. I want you for 30 years or 20 years or whatever that is. And whatever it takes to make you have a life and a career that is so good that why would you ever want to go out there and create your own business? I mean, there's the exception. Like, there's personality things, like people that, yeah, I definitely want to grow my own business someday. But then there's other people that just want a decent life and just want a place to feel secure and have a good work environment and get paid well. And I think the key is for the owner to have a mentality, and this is what Steve and Matt do definitely, is like for them to have a mentality that what can I do that makes their job, they're not owners, their job, so good that they would never want to go out there and start a business. And it's not always money, but that's definitely a necessary component. Like, you got to be making enough to make a comfortable living. But I don't think that many of the people that are struggling with their guys leaving and starting their own business, like, many of them are paying them decent. I think it's more like just valuing them, and it's the culture, you know, like how you treat them. And I know a big thing for me, and maybe this isn't, again, this comes down to personality, but a big thing for me was to see how Steve and Matt were so willing to, some people would have said, blow money on investing, training, and giving us company trips to go do things for events and whatnot. Like that really meant a lot to me anyway. And that was like, why would I want to leave? I have as good of a day job as I could ever want. The career is great. The opportunity is great. The company's growing. Basically, if I want to grow, and the other thing the employee needs to do is have the concept like, I can't just make more money. I have to figure out how to make myself more valuable to the company so that the company can make more money so that I can make more money. That's how it works. You can't get
it's that give and take. Yeah. But I like that because like there's two things that you said specifically. Like there's the culture, yes, and we have a few episodes we talked about creating a fun and valuable company culture. But the investing in the employees and clear investments, not investing in employees by saying like, oh, we bought better shovels and that helps them. Like investing in them, helping them grow, whether it be taking them to conferences, taking them to events, taking them to, or sending them off to take courses. Those types of things that help them become better, help them become stronger, are things that allow them to bring more value to the company. And then that ties into that last point that you just made. That 100%. If you are cognizant of the fact that if I bring more value to the company, I could earn more, as long as we have an open line of communication and we're understanding and have the same expectations of what more value is, then you can always do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why, one little nugget I'll touch on, that's kind of why I'm a fan of an open book policy with the employees. It's because
so what's that mean for those who are not familiar with that concept?
Yeah, like basically, as an owner, let's pretend I'm the owner. I'm sharing my numbers with the employees. I'm saying like, this is our budgeted goal. We are here. We're shooting for X net profit. And by the way, if we hit this profit goal by this date, you'll get this cut. Those are the kinds of things that I feel kind of bleed right into like a good, healthy company culture, connecting when the employee brings value to the company, they get value in return. Like I'm raising that up because I see so many people that are like, oh, like if I share my good numbers with my guys, all they're going to say is, oh, you're making so much money. I want more money. It's like, there's a cultural problem there.
That's it. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. And an open book policy doesn't mean like every detail of the books. It can be as general as what you said. Here's the goal. Here's the revenue goal.
Yep.
Here's the profit goal. Here's where we stand.
Yep.
If we can continue going this way and we hit these goals, here's what's in it for you.
Yep. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be any more than that.
Give people a goal. You'd be surprised how much more driven they become because they know what they're shooting for.
Yeah. And like if your guys are like, oh, I can't believe this is a $50,000 job. Well, hey, I mean, here's the numbers. There's $15,000 of overhead recovery in this job. Like, and those aren't BS numbers. That's just a fact of doing business. And that's what many employees don't understand, which goes back to communication and culture and all that. So
let's get to how we get there. Because if your books are a mess, you can't open them anyway.
Exactly.
So today we want to really get into the numbers side of running a hardscape business. And one of the big keys is understanding all the components that go into the right pricing for a job. Not pricing based on the market, pricing based on the needs of the client, the project, and your business.
100%.
So in that context, what's something that you feel is greatly overlooked, underestimated, that people have a misunderstanding or just flat out getting wrong about pricing?
You see people, and I'll reference back to these landscape groups on Facebook and stuff, like you see on hardscape groups, like you see people that are out there saying, oh, it's this much per square foot, and like new guys come on there, hey, what should I charge for X? And they're like, oh, just do $21 a square foot, you'll be good. It's like, oh my goodness, like please don't do that. Like maybe this is saying it a little strongly, but I kind of believe like ripping off, that's business suicide. You have no idea what the truth is underneath those numbers. Like, and there's all these different estimating methods you hear. Some people take their cost of their materials and double or triple them. Some people do a square foot thing. And like, I'm not saying like, okay, so yes, I'll do an estimate and it's 500 square foot patio. Yeah, I can come up with a square foot price for that patio, but the next patio is going to be slightly different. It's not like there's this one size fits all. Because you have access issues, you have different materials, you have subgrade problems. Everything plays into it, and you just can't simplify it to that degree. Now, to not be all negative Nelly here and say that you can't do that, what you can do is do production rates. where you are saying, hey, we can on a medium difficulty access project, we can produce X amount of square feet per this many man hours, and it takes this many tons of stone base per square foot. Like, you can do production rates like that, but that way, instead of a flat square foot price, it's like each component, the labor, the material, and all that, has its own production rate, which can flex with the unique demands to that project. If we do need a subgrade amendment, then we can use the production rate to figure out what kind of type S mortar we need and amend the subgrade and all of that. Like, it's not, instead of being a one size fits all, you apply your square foot methodology to each individual component of the estimate. That's
a way to evolve from that first just blanket square foot price.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Just to back up a little bit, your point of the problem with a square foot price or materials times 3 formula is you have a set price at the top, but all the costs that roll up into that price are variable. Therefore, the margin per project is variable.
Exactly.
And you don't want your profit to be variable. You want your profit to be controlled.
100%. Which means the square foot price becomes variable instead of the
That's
profit.
right. The whole thing, it's a sliding scale where all the pieces have to move together. You can't have a fixed point with everything else moving around before that fixed point.
If you're paying attention to your numbers for a good amount of time, like, you could say, like, yeah, my square foot pricing always falls between X and X.
Yeah, for sure. But that, that's a safe way to play like a early ballpark estimate game if you want to do that.
Yeah.
If you have tracked things like production rates.
Exactly.
If you have done some of the things that we're going to talk about today, establishing the budget for your business, establishing what is the overhead of your company, and how do you recover it per man hour on site, per job, per week, all that stuff. How do you track that final cost versus the actual, or that final estimate versus the actual cost? And if you've done these things enough, then you can say, yeah, you know what, between $20 and $24 a square foot for this style, in this application, with that general shape, that's generally the range.
Yes.
But you don't start there.
Exactly. And so what I want, for anybody that's new and starting out a business or trying to figure out, like, how do I come up with a price? We just said, like, what you can't do. And we did mention on production rates what you can do. But also, like, I think, like, the biggest thing that people need to begin working in or getting the concept of in their heads when they're doing estimates is this idea of overhead recovery.
Okay. What's that mean?
And basically it means, like, okay, so you have trucks, you have internet and office expenses, you have a computer, you have fuel, you have a shop, you have all these overhead expenses. Just to give you an idea of what I mean when I say overhead expenses.
Yep.
You have let's say that you have $1 million business and maybe you have 250 grand of overhead expenses or 200, whatever it is. But
they're costs that are not necessarily associated to production on the job site.
Exactly.
But, like, just having the business operational is there.
Yeah.
Electrical bills, office rent, like all the other things you said, like they're things that have to be there. I have a business, I have these costs, period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, labor, pavers, stone, those are all direct costs to every job. You don't have those expenses unless you're producing a job. But your internet bill, your fuel bill, like, those are your shop rent. Those are all things that you're going to be paying, whether it's a rain day and you're not working or whether you are working.
Correct.
Those are overhead. Those are overhead expenses.
That's overhead. All right. And then recovery of that looks like what?
So basically, it can be very basic. Like, basically, the idea is to come up with a percentage that you mark up your direct costs, your paver, stone, and labor, to recover those overhead expenses inherently.
Okay.
So, some people break this down.
This is a different way from the way I've learned it. So let's dive into this a little bit, because the way I've learned it, I'll just explain. Like, for me, it's the overhead, and then how many production hours do I have in a year? Overhead divided by production hours gives me a rate. It's $10, it's $12, it's whatever, and I add that to every man hour consumed on site. And that way, as long as my team is working on a job site as planned based on the projects that I would sell, I would recover the overhead. But what you're talking about is a percentage.
Yeah, it's basically the exact same concept that you described, except we're doing it on a percentage factor instead of like a certain amount of dollars factor.
Okay, help me understand.
Which produces what's that?
Help me understand that.
Yeah. So basically it's like, okay, you have, let's say $1 million in sales.
Mm-hmm.
You have $300,000 in labor expenses. You have $300,000 in material expenses in your annual budget. I'm saying, like, this is basically what a typical annual year looks like for your company.
Okay.
So those are all direct expenses out of that million. And then you have, say, $250,000 in overhead expenses, and those are the costs we need to somehow recover when we produce an estimate for a customer. Okay. So I take my direct expenses, my labor and my materials, and what I'll do is I'll take my I'll figure out like where do I want to recover those overhead expenses. I can say I want to recover them on labor, I want to cover them on materials, like maybe do 20% of them on materials and the rest on labor. But I have a spreadsheet that I use, and which will actually be available in the Hardscaper.com course for anyone listening that wants to use it. But they can basically plug in their numbers on this spreadsheet. It takes, like, if you have your profit and loss statement in front of you, it takes a few minutes. And that spreadsheet will do is it tells you, like, based on your numbers, here's your gross profit, here's your net profit, here's the percentage you need to mark up your direct costs with to recover those overhead expenses that you have. And then you use that percentage. Let's say it's 85% on labor and 20% on materials. You can kind of like make that 50-50 or wherever you want. Yeah. So let's say you do that. And then when you are taking and creating an estimate for a job, let's say, I'm just going to use very round numbers, $100 in materials for a job and $100 in labor for a job. So you would take that, and those are costs, your costs out of pocket. And then you take that 100 times that 85% markup for overhead recovery. That result is your break-even cost, meaning you don't make a nickel until you charge that result. So it's like cost times overhead recovery markup percentage equals your break-even. You take that break-even result and then apply your profit, whether you want 10%, 15, 20, whatever you want. That result is the customer-facing price. So that's the concept. Okay.
So what I like about the way you're presenting it, though, is I'm recovering my overhead two ways. I'm not just recovering it on labor hours expended in the field. I'm also recovering it with the materials associated to the project.
And that spreadsheet I described, like, you have the freedom to say, I want to only recover my overhead on labor, or I want to recover more of it on materials and less on labor. Like, you have that flexibility. Okay. So if you want your man-hour price to be lower and want your markup on your materials to be slightly higher, then you have that. You can do that. It's not nobody.
Do you vary that per project, or is there a benefit to going heavier on the labor, much lighter on the materials, or what do you recommend? How do you do it?
Yeah, we don't vary it on the project. We kind of like pick, like, okay, this is our annual budget. This is our annual markup percentage for this year. Based on our annual budget, this is what we're doing. And then for the per project, so we typically do like a 20 or 30% of overhead recovery on materials, and then dump all the rest on labor. And the reason we do put most of our overhead recovery on labor is because labor is a finite resource. Like, materials is like, depends how much you sell. And labor can somewhat be that way, but labor represents a span of time, a year. And it's like, I have to recover those costs in this amount of time, a year. And so when we tie most of our overhead recovery to labor, it's also tied to the time throughout the year. Meaning, like, if you suddenly start selling jobs that are maybe very expensive materials, or suddenly they're less materials or whatever, like, you don't run into the situation where your budget is off because you misjudged, like, the makeup of your jobs in terms of how much is materials and how much isn't. But labor is kind of more of this constant, finite resource. It's your most precious commodity. And
it's the most expensive part too.
Yes, it's the most expensive. It's the most consistent, and it's also the thing that differentiates yourself from whatever competition you have in your area. Everybody's buying the same materials, but your labor is your art, it's your skill, it's your craft, and so that's where the money should be.
Okay, well, that makes sense. When you put it that way, that makes a lot of sense. At what point, because like you started at Tussey 15 years ago.
Yep.
At what point did you did all of this become either important to the company or important to you in your role? Like, what was the aha moment? Like, whoa, we gotta pay a lot of attention to this.
Yeah, it was probably, and I'd say this is probably true for many landscape companies around this point. When you start hitting that like $1 million mark, it can be 250. Some people would start approaching the subject right out of the gate when they're starting their business, which is awesome. But many people kind of like, landscape business owners, hardscape business owners, typically are people that love to run equipment, play in the dirt, do the work, but not necessarily be very.
We don't love spreadsheets.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't meet many hardscapers who are passionate about Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. No.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happens is it's very common for a landscape or hardscape business to get up to basically as far as that owner can take it without being like, okay, I'm up against a ceiling. I'm up at a plateau. I can't grow anymore. I'm an owner operator. I'm the central cog to the system. I got to figure out systems and processes so that I can hire a salesperson and tell him how to estimate jobs. And I can't right now because it's all in my head with 20 years of experience. How do I tell that guy how to do it? And the answer is what we're talking about. Goating a budget, coming up with your overhead recovery percentage, and then suddenly your pricing is standardized, and the new guy can come in and build an accurate estimate for you as long as your production rates are accurate. And but back to your original question, I feel like when businesses kind of approach that $1 million mark, or when the owner operators like max out,
it's kind of that tipping point.
Yep, and that's when it happened for Tussey. Is like we really started going to all kinds of shows or events where we were, this was kind of the subject, like how to be profitable, how to estimate for jobs, how to build a budget, and we Derek is a sales guy there at Tussey, and he was kind of a big driving factor to we got to figure this out. We got to turn this and make this into a standardized process. And Steve and Matt were definitely pushing for it as well. And over a process of, really 10 plus years, it was kind of this refining, honing, tweaking process until we got it to what we felt was as simple and as basic and effective as a process as possible. Because nobody wants to overcomplicate things. You still want it to be as simple as possible yet effective. But I feel like when companies kind of get to a point where the owner operator's maxed out, which is often around that $1 million mark, is when this stuff really starts to I either got to do this or
it gets real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of work though.
It isn't.
Okay.
15, if you have a QuickBooks account or, if you have a profit and loss statement, you can literally come up with your overhead markup percentage with your numbers in less than 15 minutes. If you don't have that, if you're completely running by the seat of your pants off of a napkin or a notebook, then we'll have to do some best educated guessing, which might take 30 minutes instead of 15 because you don't have numbers in front of you. But I've also kind of developed spreadsheets okay, so you've never figured out what it costs you to own your equipment? Well, here's a spreadsheet that just plug in your pieces of equipment and it'll tell you. Or you've never figured out what your overhead expenses are? Here's a list. What do you pay in office rent? What do you pay in fuel? What do you pay in insurances? So I've kind of built these little spreadsheets to kind of help people that don't even have a profit and loss statement to do it. And at worst case scenario, you'll spend an hour at it if you have nothing,
So it's not that bad because a lot of, or at least I think, a lot of contractors would be tempted to say, well, my accountant handles this stuff. He tells me how much, after reviewing the books, you could be going in blind in that first year, but after reviewing the books after year one, you've learned a lot of lessons that your accountant is sure to rub in your face if you didn't make enough profit. I don't know. It seems, Wes, like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, that's obviously not a lot of time at all. It feels like it should be a lot more than that to break down these costs and understand this stuff, no?
Well, you might spend, let's say that you legitimately have never, like I said, done your overhead or figured out what equipment costs you, figured out your tractor.
I started my business. I worked for someone. Yeah. He was charging between 20 and 25 bucks a square foot. I'm operating in the same space. I'm smaller than he is. I don't have as much overhead. It's me and another employee. I feel like I can be in that range. So I started my business a year or two ago, and we're doing okay. It feels like things are okay. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I want to have my business running for a long time. I don't want to be responsible for all aspects of the business all the time. I want to be able to delegate. I want to make sure that's a healthy business so I can delegate the right tasks. So I'm at that point now. Surely it'll take more than an hour or two.
The only thing, so there's only 8 cells to fill in on that spreadsheet. And the question of how long does it take is how long does it take you to figure out
the number that goes in each one.
Yeah. And I have, in the hardscaper.com training course, I have very detailed videos that show you exactly like, okay, let's assume you never have done this. Well, here's how. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's talk about that course a little bit, and then I have a couple other questions. But
Yeah.
let's talk about that course a little bit, because you've been kind enough to invest hours and hours and you've invested more time into building the course than it would take to actually fill out the spreadsheet if you've never done it before.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've put together a really awesome course. It's 3 parts. It's budgeting, it's estimating, and then it's job costing.
Yep.
Tell us about it.
So it's basically those 3 sections, and basically what I tried to do is approach each of those 3 subjects with a why do you even need to care? Like, why? You know, kind of the scenario you were giving me. I've been in business 2 years. I've been doing this spreadsheet, and I feel we're doing okay. And what I want to help people do is switch from feeling to knowing. Cold, hard calculation. There's no feeling involved. That's emotional stuff. Yeah, I think we're doing all right. And yeah, I had enough money to buy a new truck at the end of the year. But the problem is, let's say that you didn't have enough money to buy a new truck at the end of the year. By that time, and your accountant is rubbing it in your face, by that time, it's way too late to do anything about it for that year. And that's where I'm skipping ahead to job costing. That's where job costing comes in. Job costing is like, it's often this thing where everybody agrees you should do it. It's a good thing, but almost no one does it.
Okay, hold on. Let's back up. Before we get into the job costing. But first, what is job costing? And then we'll back up. So now you're talking about job costing, and first reaction is job costing is figuring out the cost of the job.
Yeah, it's basically, very simply, it's comparing what I estimated the job at to how we actually did.
Okay, so it's not figuring out the cost. It's assessing the cost versus the estimate.
Estimated versus actual.
There you go. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, because I can't get to that stage without doing the first 2 parts.
Yes.
So the budgeting part, which is the biggest part of the course.
Yep.
Let's talk about that first. Like, what is the importance of establishing a budget? What is a budget for a hardscape company? And let's use some real examples here. Let's not talk pie in the sky. You're doing it. You've done it for 15 years. So let's dive into it here.
So the why is, I would say, is switching from the feeling that I'm doing okay to knowing I'm doing okay.
Okay.
No emotion involved. It's just a logical thing. Am I or am I not? Mm-hmm. And then the how is essentially, and you don't have to use our spreadsheet in the course there, but it's made for you. Why not? Mm-hmm. So it's basically just like, give us 8 numbers out of your business numbers, like your sales, your labor expenses, your payroll, basically, what you spent in materials for your vendors, what you spent in overhead expenses, what your equipment costs are, your subcontractor costs, and that's simple. You just plug those in, and that's the how. And the purpose, like what the outcome of building that budget is you get your very own overhead recovery markup percentage.
Okay.
Based on your numbers, not someone else's template, not someone else's like, oh, this is always what worked for me. It's basically plug in your data, your raw, hard source of truth, and you get X. This is what you have to charge, or this is what you have to mark up your cost to cover your overhead.
So you've basically provided it's literally a template, but
yeah,
it's a template that I follow with basically walkthrough videos of each step of the template, so that I know. Yeah. As long as I can answer these questions, I'll get that answer at the end, which is great. One of the things in there is establishing a sales goal.
Yep.
So why is that so important?
So we have to understand, like, if you have X amount of overhead costs, $250,000 of overhead costs, we have to understand. We have to understand how much that is in relation to your overall sales. So, like, if you have $500,000 in sales with $250,000 of overhead costs, that's a problem. If you have $1.5 million in sales with $250,000 overhead, that's great. We just have to know. Just have to establish that baseline.
Well, that's the sales that I have now, right?
Yeah.
Establishing a sales goal for the future is not as easy as just saying, like, hey, we're doing $1 million of business now, and I feel that we can get to 1.5 million by the end of this year. Because there's a lot of work that goes into getting there, right?
Yeah, there is, and that's possible. But what's much more realistic and much more probably common is maybe 10% growth year over year. And so what I tell people is, like, if you've been in business for a while, look back over your history. Like, you went from 500,000 to 750 to 800 to 950 to 1,050,000. Like, look at that and kind of establish a baseline of what your growth has been, and kind of use that to project what you'll sell next year. And if you're going to crank up marketing and crank up, hire more people and raise your production, then yeah, maybe you can shoot that number up a little bit, but stay realistic with that projection.
So if you're not going to change, and I was just using 1 to 1.5 as an example, but basically the point you just made is if you're not going to make significant changes in multiple facets of your business, aggressive growth is not probably realistic.
No.
Because it's not like we'll just sell more. Well, can you produce more?
Exactly.
Can you sell it for a higher price? Can you improve your margin as you're doing so? What is going to change that will allow you to produce more? Do you need different people? Do you need more people? Do you need different equipment? Do you need better equipment? There's a lot of things that go into it. So there's a lot of thought that goes into. I guess my point is, establishing the budget, establishing the overhead to recover, all the things we talked about, that stuff takes a couple hours to put together. That really is just one small part of the business, because establishing the goal for the business and where you want to take the company into the future requires a lot of assessment of all these different parts. But if you don't have this part done, you can't get into that other, what do we do next? You don't even know what you're doing,
Yeah, this is you got to do this first, then we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that you can't hardly make a template to answer those questions.
No.
I would say if you're asking those theoretical or hey, what could we do to grow significantly? That's the kind of thing that you need to get into a business coach with or peers, industry peers, and actually come up with a business plan that would produce the growth you're looking for if that's what your objective is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially, I agree with the industry peers, because you just look at the past 20 or so episodes that we've put out here. Talk to those guys, see what they're doing. They've all taken a different approach to the growth. Some with marketing, some with efficiency, some with sales approach, some with changing their designs to go and elevate the value of the projects that they're selling. Or you could do all of the above.
Yeah, there's opportunity in each one of those you mentioned. And
That's
there's
right.
more than that, too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Let's bring it back. So we talked about the importance of budgeting, establishing that budget so you can understand what your overhead is. Once you understand what your total overhead cost is, then we can figure out what the overhead recovery rate needs to be. Then we can estimate the sales price of a project. Right?
Exactly.
Okay,
you're
let's talk about
all
that.
the data that you need to come up with a rock solid estimate for your company. And it's basically now that you have that overhead recovery percentage, and the spreadsheet also gives you your profit markup based on your sales goal and all of your costs, and this is what's left. So let's say your profit's 11.43%. Okay, that's whatever. So now building an estimate, this is what I call instead of being price focused, what does my competition charge? It's now I'm cost focused. What is this job going to cost me in labor, in materials, and subcontractors, and equipment, etc. So now creating an estimate has become as simple as okay, you estimate all your materials and you have a cost for materials. You plug that cost into the spreadsheet, or you take that cost and do the math yourself. Take that cost, and so basically you determine your cost for labor, materials, subcontractors, and equipment, your hard raw cost, what you're paying for them. Then you take those costs, multiply by your overhead recovery markup percentage, take that result, which is your break even, multiply that by your profit markup, and that equals your customer facing price. And
plus taxes if you're in a state or a province with sales
taxes would be additional to that. That's right. Yeah.
Good. Do you? I already hear people listening, and it's my prices are going to go through the roof. What's going to happen? If I do all this stuff, what if my prices go way up? Can I afford to take this approach?
Well, there's this saying in God we trust, all others bring data. We're starting with data. Let's at least produce this data and find out just how good or how bad we are. Then we can talk about how to solve that dilemma. And let's say I just helped a guy build a budget this week. Typical scenario, wasn't charging anything for his equipment depreciation, didn't really have a hand on his overhead expenses, and we built. Basically what we did is we took an estimate he had just done, and had come up with like a $12,900 number for a small patio or something like that.
Okay.
And then we did his budget with everything I just described.
Yeah.
And we assessed his costs, plugged all his costs into this software that I'm talking about, or this formula, and the price ended up being $16,600. And this is the reality for so many people out there. And this is why we do
$3,500 gap there.
So I was like, well, hang on a sec. Just plug in that 12.9 number you had in there. Just plug that in. And the number, the moment he did that, it spits out like what your profit is with that number, and it's like,
And it to be negative profit at that point.
was
Huh?
negative 15%.
Holy cow!
So you tell me, what
Yeah.
if my prices are going to go up? My question is, I'm not asking that question. I'm like, how am I going to feed my family?
Yeah.
How am I going to pay my guys?
At minus 15%, you're not
Minus
doing
15%.
that. Yeah.
And sure, maybe you still have a couple $1,000s in your bank account. You're still making it. What happens when your truck is in an accident? What happens when something breaks down? Like, you can't be riding on a razor thin edge. You got to be like that's what I call business suicide. Like sticking your head in the sand and ignoring this. Like, let's first start with the data. Like, okay, this fear of my prices are going to go through the roof and I won't be able to sell the work. Well, the truth is, you're not going to be around to sell the work very long if you don't take a hard look at this.
And it becomes, like you just said, it's a different set of questions and discussions to address that dilemma.
Yeah.
It's not, I need to keep my prices low so I can sell work, so I can keep cash coming in. That's wrong. That's wrong. If you're doing that, you are exactly like you said, you're setting yourself up for failure. You can't get out of that rut. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to understand what things cost, figure out what the sale price needs to be, and figure out how can I sell at that price. What do I, if you're having difficulty selling that patio at 16.5, like you just said,
Yep.
What are you doing wrong elsewhere? Because the price is the price.
Exactly.
Now you could look at it and you could say, okay, well, maybe that price is way too high because my costs are way too high, and you need to look at your costs, and maybe you need to discipline your labor. Maybe you're doing way too much stuff by hand, and if you had a machine on site for, let's say, for excavation, you could save a bunch of time. Maybe if you don't have the capital to get that kind of machine, you should be looking to renting that kind of machine that can help you do it. Maybe you need to consider building it a different way, like using something like gator base or other synthetic base to greatly reduce excavation depth. That reduces the time, that reduces the costs, that has a greater materials cost, perhaps, but saves a bunch of the time, which is most of the expense. Like, if you don't do all this work that we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes, you can't even answer those questions. So it could be on the cost side. It could be how you present yourself. It could be you're not getting the right leads. You're getting customers that only have $12,000 for a patio. Those aren't the right customers because you can't build a patio for $12,000. You know, these are all the things that you really can only take a good look at. And I like the expression you used, like, without the data, you can't make a real factual decision. Everything's a hunch. And if you want to take your business to that next level, wherever you are now, to grow in a planned, sustainable, controlled fashion, which I understand, like, even with the best data, the best planning, it doesn't go exactly to plan. But you put the odds in your favor when you are assessing all of these different variables, because there are variables that you do control and there's variables that you don't. But you know what? Most of them are in that first category, variables you do control. So you need to have the discipline to do this exercise of figuring out your costs, figuring out your budget, figuring out your overhead, figuring out the proper sale price for the project, and then having that final discipline, the job costing, to evaluate the estimated versus the actual to see if you're right. You need to have that discipline if you want to stand a chance in having a long, successful business life, so that you can have something that you're proud of, that your team is proud of, and you can have people like you that stick around for 15 years and really help elevate the company. You know, it starts with this.
Yep.
And
that
the same, but it's the truth, man. like the discipline that we all have to grind it out in 40 degrees. Well, I'm saying in Celsius, so whatever that
100 degrees.
Yeah, 100 degrees in the middle of the summertime, or just above freezing, or even below freezing at the start or the end of the season, just to get it done. That same discipline, that same grit that we apply there, we need to apply in the office too. And you need to make sure you set aside the time for that, because otherwise you just won't be around long enough to get the most, like get the true fruits of your labor.
100%.
You know?
I'm taking this course right now called Insane Productivity.
Okay, tell me about it.
I love what you're saying about like the same discipline, the same nose of the grindstones, persistence you put out there in the field through thick and thin. You have to do the same in the office. Is exactly what you said. Like I just want to drive that point home, because like otherwise, like some people think they can just grind their way out of a problem. Maybe you can. There are times when there are problems that you can solve that way.
But you won't stop the problems from happening.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Yes.
You can grind your way out of almost any problem, but you will not prevent the problems from reoccurring.
We don't want a Band-Aid. We want a solution.
That's it. And it really is hard to force yourself to like, whoa, hold on, we got to stop. Because once the train's moving, it took so long to get it going, you know? You don't want to pull it to a grinding halt because something's wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes you better do that than have the train go flying off the tracks.
Exactly. You know, and what you were saying about like all those questions you were saying, like once you have this, then you can start asking. Maybe we are inefficient with our labor. Maybe we're sending guys off in trucks to go pick up base material to be getting it delivered. You know, there's all kinds of questions and possible.
$150 delivery doesn't sound crazy.
No.
When you're figuring, I got two guys in a truck who are taking a half-hour commute there and a half-hour commute back. There's the time I'm paying them. There's the fuel on the truck. There's the wear and tear on the truck. I'm still paying for the materials. They come back, and that's 2 man-hours of lost production time on the job site.
That's 2 man-hours that nothing was happening on the job site.
And when you look at how much you sell a man-hour for, once you figure out the overhead recovery, you're like, oh dear, I'm losing $150 sending guys to pick it up.
100%. That's what I mean about data. Once you have data, then you can start making like completely logical, rational choices instead of like emotional, like, nah, I can't pay $150 for a delivery. Just 2 guys go get it, or 1 guy, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, basically, your people are your skilled craftsmen. Those people should be producing billable work at every minute possible. They shouldn't be in a truck running to go get materials. They shouldn't be, you fill in the blank.
Yeah. And then it becomes easier to justify things like investing in an enclosed trailer and having all the racking and the storage for things like tubes of glue. Yep. Why do we keep cases of tubes of glue in the trailer and at the shop? Because that trip to Home Depot to pick it up, or to my local landscape yard to pick up adhesive, is lost money. 10 times the cost of the tube, you know?
I would say, like, over the 10, 15 years with Tussey, one of the biggest things I can look back at and point at that was a huge efficiency gain was we started bulk storing stone, aggregates, joint sand, pave edge, everything. We started bulk storing it at the shop. And so instead of a truck full of guys running to a local landscape supply, picking the stuff up for a job, or even paying a delivery fee, it was right there. 5 minutes, you had that truck loaded, you were out on the way, nobody stopped anywhere, and you were on that job as efficiently and as quickly as possible. That was one of the biggest things that Tussey Landscaping did that dramatically increased the efficiency and production time per man hour, which was great. And one of the things I didn't even mention in that spreadsheet, there's a statistics page in that spreadsheet that tells you, hey, based on the numbers you plugged in here, you may have some opinions on what you think your man hour costs you, but this is what it costs you. And this is what you have to charge per man hour to come up with a profit. So it does give you that kind of insight as well.
So let's talk about SynkedUP for a minute here, because while you've still been doing work with Tussey for a while, you're clearly very passionate about this subject to the point where you went and built an app to help contractors.
Yeah, I don't know, we get a little tenacious, or we just get we may go a little overkill when we go to solve problems sometimes. When we were on this kick, like figuring out this budgeting thing and then make it as simple as possible to track this stuff and job cost this stuff, and there's all kinds of things we could talk. We haven't hardly even touched on job costing and all that, but we're like, we got to make this simple. Like, because here's the thing: you can know all this stuff. Knowledge is worthless unless there's action. Worthless. It won't do you any good unless you act on it. And so what we wanted to do was make it super easy. And my solution to action is systems and processes. So we wanted super easy systems and processes that made it the path of least resistance for us to act on this knowledge. Meaning like, so we built this, instead of using manual spreadsheets, which are manual and the files over there and you name it, or it's a printed in a job folder, we kind of had this picture in our head for an app, and we've used a ton of the industry available softwares, and they all have their strong points. They all have things they're good at, but the biggest thing that we didn't have was a clean one platform that enabled us to manage the project from A to Z inside that one platform. That enabled the salesperson, office admin, owner, foreman, and everybody to work in that same platform. Everybody's putting data into the same platform, and everybody's accessing information out of the same platform. That was what was missing when we were using the various other. We were using 4 or 5 different softwares at the same time, and I mean, I don't have to tell you how inefficient that was. And yeah, we had the tools, but everything was inefficient. So we kind of had this dream of having one system where everybody in the whole team was synced up into the same system, and that's what we spent the last 5-6 years building. And this. Everything that I'm talking to you about with like the spreadsheet and the numbers and the percentages, all that stuff is all automated in this system. So it's a beautiful drag and drop estimate builder, and it's automatically applying your overhead and profit to it. It's like in seconds you can build a detailed estimate even with templates and production rates. You can set all that stuff up, and like you can build complicated estimates in a few minutes. You can send it off to the customer for review and approval. They can make a down payment. You can schedule it. There's an app. You can track your time, and instead of having a paper job folder, there's a digital job folder right in the mobile app. People are clocking in and out. They're getting paid based on that time. They're recording their actual materials, what they use every time they clock out. It's like, what did you use today? Here's the list of estimated materials the salesperson thought you would use. What did you actually use today? Record all of that. It automatically collects your estimated side versus your actual side, and you automatically have your job cost report live. Everybody, you can see like, hey, we estimated 100 man hours. We came in at 89. Awesome. Good job, guys. Or like, hey, we estimated 100. We went to 120. Man, what went wrong? Access was difficult. Okay, next time I have a job with that, I'm going to adjust the way I estimate that thing. That's the purpose of job costing. It's your feedback loop. Instead of waiting for your accountant to tell you in December that you didn't make any money, you know you didn't make any money the day you pull off that job, and you know that the next time you estimate that a job similar to that, you're not going to make the same mistake. So yeah, that's basically there's the spreadsheet that's in the hardscaper.com course, which you can use. That gives you all the knowledge, gives you the data to act on. You can even build estimates and job costs in that spreadsheet. And you can keep that spreadsheet for life, copy it for every single job you ever do for the next 10 years, go for it. But if you want to automate it with systems and processes that make it super easy and efficient and accessible from anywhere, then SynkedUP is what we built to do that for our own company. We started a new company to sell it to the industry.
That's good, man. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I mean, it's impressive to see the evolution of the industry. I've been in the industry pretty much my entire life as well, and just looking at the things that people do. Like forget just like the cool things that people are building, but like, you built 1 million spreadsheets. You're like, this is craziness. We got to get an app. So you start downloading these different softwares and paying for subscriptions, and you're like, it still isn't good enough. Like it's still disjointed, and I see this part of the picture, but you don't. And then I have to, like, we're not on the same page. We're not synced up. And then you go and you're like, well, okay, forget this. We're just going to do it ourselves. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to build this thing up, and we're going to make it work for us. And if it works for us, it'll probably work for other people, and we can help other people too. And that's what you did. And what I really like about the partnership that we're building here with Hardscaper and with SynkedUP is the course that has been built to help all contractors everywhere at no cost at all. And the spreadsheet that accompanies it is there free forever at no cost for contractors all over. It can be used, like you said, for every single project you do. And if you want to take the next step, then you have software and apps and support like SynkedUP that allows you to take that next step. but you can take the steps. You don't have to jump in all at once, and you can figure it out, because it's, you know, it's like learning how to drive with an F1 car.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know enough. Let's start with a little beater. Let's, not too much power. You can't really mess it up too much. Let's get you going. And then once you understand that, then we'll graduate to something else. We'll graduate to something else. And understanding that, whether it's a business or whether it's a skill that you learn in life, like, it takes practice, and it takes that series of small incremental achievements and wins to build the experience that allows you to say, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
And this part is just like any other skill.
Exactly. And like, so that's you laid it out perfect. Like, that spreadsheet is like what my goal is, yeah, it'd be awesome if you want to use SynkedUP, but I really want to help the industry figure this out. Like, if there's anything that I want you to connect to, is like this concept of how to recover my overhead. Yeah. And here's how you get that percentage. And here's how you get to the point where you can accurately price a job so you're selling it for $16,600, not $12,900.
That's it.
And that spreadsheet will help you do that for free. And if there's any light bulb I want to go off, it's like, this is how I'm going to recover my overhead accurately, persistently on every single job. And it's like, I can't fail. The only way you can fail is if you're misestimating how long it's going to take you, or you're mismeasuring your square footage.
But even then, that's what the job costing component is for. If I mess that up, I won't make that mistake again. That's why that final aspect is so critical.
Exactly.
Like, it's great you did all the math, and like you figured it all out, and you did an estimate, and you sold the job for $16,500. If you're still off, you need to know that, and you need to make sure you don't repeat that mistake.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, there's probably a lot of people on here that have their own spreadsheet or have their own software they're using to estimate with.
So many.
But
everyone I talk to has a different spreadsheet. They're all going about it a somewhat different way, but they're all doing it for the same reasons.
Yeah, and that's good. That's a noble cause. But what many people don't end up doing then is job costing. And that's where, I got to reiterate that feedback loop. Like, if you want to ask, like, what made Tussey successful, us saying, like, we are going to job cost every single job without exception was a huge key to that.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things. Like, honestly, talking to guys, well, on the show or not, it becomes like, well, do you do the analysis after? Like, do you do the actual versus estimated? Like, wow, like,
I feel
we try to. Like, we do it, how many times do you actually do it? Well, probably like 4 times. How many jobs you do? 30, 40. Okay, so 10% of the time you're checking. Does that feel right? Do you feel okay now that I just said it's 10% of the time? Yeah, I guess you're right. Like, that's what I mean by having the discipline.
Yeah.
Like, you need to check every single time, because every single job is different.
Yeah, and you need to know it when you mess it up.
That's right.
And what's so hard about job costing is, like, the daily process of tracking stuff. That's the hard part. Even with a spreadsheet, like,
you still have to put it in. It's not doing it automatically.
Exactly. Like, are you tracking your hours every single day? Oh man, that's another 5 minutes every day or whatever. Are you tracking like, hey, we bid 18 ton of stone, we actually used 22. Are you tracking that? Like, that's the kind of thing that if there's one thing that SynkedUP takes you to another whole level instead of using a spreadsheet instead of SynkedUP, it's how easy and naturally and intuitive.
It removes the friction.
It removes the friction. It's the system process, and it's basically like the carrot on the end of the stick. To get paid, I have to clock in. To clock in, I have to record my materials. And then I get paid. It's like, it's just.
And there's other ways to do it too. Like, if, again, and it's not because I don't want people to subscribe to your software here, your app, but like, what's his name, Stephen Poirier, who was on a few episodes ago from Pear Tree. He was talking about an app. It's a free app that he uses to clock in, clock out his guys, and to have all the processes mapped out and to track all those things. And the reason it's working, there's twofold. One is he developed the processes and what we're going to track with his team. Like, what should we be tracking? Here's what I want to see, but what should we be tracking? How could we do it? And then second, he made it easy by getting an app so it's on everyone's phone.
Yep.
You do those two things, that's the start of having that accountability and that ownership from multiple members of your team, that's what makes it easy. Because if it's up to you exclusively to track all of this stuff, like you got to book like a day or two of just office time to stay on top of this.
Yeah.
But you know, people are smart, and people are smarter than they get credit for. And if you have a smartphone, which is like 99% of everyone who works in the industry now, but if you have one, you can track this stuff. And you know what? If one of my employees doesn't track it properly, like, I'll talk to him about it and we'll figure out what's wrong. I'm not going to say, well, he can't do it. People can do a lot of amazing things if you just give them the right framework. Like, here's why we're doing it. This is why it's important. Here's how you play a role in this and why you're so important to the process. And just by doing that, people will take ownership if you have the right people.
Yeah, people just want to know what to do. If you tell them what to do and you give them a system
and why, what to do and why. Yeah.
And if you want them to care about the why, give them a bonus based on net profit, which you can only get if you job cost, which you can only get if you have the data.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a big circle.
Yeah, you know, and one thing about the whole estimating thing about that scenario of the $16,600 versus the $12,900 price for that same job. One thing I tell people is like, oh, you're scared to death that you won't be able to sell at that price. Here's my out. It's like, if the customer's like, I don't have 16.6, I got to be at 13 grand max. Okay, fine. We can reduce the scope of work.
And that's why having the work areas, like you have it broken down in the course, right? You have the paver patio, you have the landscaping, you have the lighting. Those are work areas that you have them defined for the course.
Yep.
So if the project, as defined by those work areas and presented and everything, is 16.5, and the client says, I only have 13, okay, great. We can remove the lighting. Oh, I really want the lighting. Well, this is the cost of the lighting.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that we can just make it cheaper.
Yeah. You know, most of the time, that extra $3,000 magically appears in the bank account when you're like, well, if I can take it out, like, no, we want it. Okay. And then we have things like the Pave Now, Pay Later program, our financing program for Techo Pros, that is exactly for that. You have that conversation with the customer up front, like, hey, have you secured financing for the project? Before I even come out and do an estimate or anything, you know, our projects typically range from, I don't know, $16,000 to $36,000 for what you've described here on this call or in your email or on the form that you submitted. Have you secured the finances for the project? Well, I don't really know. I'm curious how much it's going to cost. Okay, well, just so you know, we offer a financing program. It's called Pave Now, Pay Later. So if ever, when we're discussing this, you fall in love with a project or the design and it's a little bit more than you thought you would be investing this year, we can help you with financing so that you can get everything that you want right now. And then you bring it up at that very early stage, and then you bring it up when you present the pricing, and you've given yourself that option. Now you have two choices. I can take the lighting out, or actually three choices, or you can figure out your financing option, or I can offer financing for you so that you can afford it with all these bells and whistles like I've presented to you here today.
Yeah. Just make it simpler for the customer. Reduce the friction for the customer. And that's like, hey, I got the financing for you.
That's it. But that same mentality, I like what you just said there. You reduce the friction for the customer, you make their life easy, they're going to do business with you.
Yeah.
Same thing for your team. Same thing. Make it easy for them to do business the way you want them to do business, and they will do it.
100%. People just want to know what to do.
And that's what the course is for, that's what the template's for, and that's what SynkedUP's for.
Exactly. And I feel like, you know, that question of like, how can I get my guys committed to my business? How can I get my guys to care? It's like, if you're like a rabbit and you're picking off on this tangent, then you're doing this, like, that's not a culture of stability. The guys are not sure what mood you're in that day. They're not sure what's expected of them that day. That's where people leave, you know. And if you give them a system and a process, here's your clear outcome that we're shooting for. Here's the goal. You know, that just solves so many of those issues.
That's it. Wes, if people want to ask you questions directly, you were saying you were helping a contractor the other day. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, well, to reach me directly, as far as like that whole building a budget thing, if that thing looks like a massive mountain to you, and you have, even though we told you it's 30 minutes, 1 hour max, if that still is like, I don't want to do it, I have no idea. Like I actually at this point in the game, personally help people build their own budget when they come on for SynkedUP. So if they do sign up for SynkedUP, we can actually help them live in person, help them build their own budget and figure out exactly what they need to charge per man hour. Otherwise, you can reach
that alone is worth the price.
Yeah. But otherwise, like, we're on the socials, like SynkedUP, Facebook, SynkedUP, SynkedUP is our handle, which you can find on Facebook and Instagram. And you can find us on our website, synkedup.com. But, you know, I don't want it to be just purely a sales pitch here. I really want people to, like, take action, get that spread. Go to hardscaper.com, get that spreadsheet. I don't know if is there a commenting thing in hardscaper.com, like where you can comment on the course content?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. And
So,
don't be shy. Put the comments in. Like, we're trying to help you. Like,
exactly. I'll just kind of peruse those comments every once in a while and just try to help people. But if you want to reach me directly, message me on a social or the website. If you want me to help you build your budget, sign up for SynkedUP. If you just have a basic question before to get you unblocked before you go on to the next step in that spreadsheet, leave a comment on hardscaper.com's course and we'll answer your question.
And hardscaper.com is totally free too. So it's just take the time, invest the time there, and it will pay dividends in your company down the road. Actually, more than down the road, pretty much immediately. Yeah.
And just to be clear, like that whole hardscaper.com course is exactly the why, the how you think through this, why this principle is important. This is the outcome of this principle. So it gets into all the nitty-gritty details efficiently that we obviously couldn't touch every single thing here on this little call here.
That's why we built a course.
That's why we built the course.
Wes, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. This has been super fun. I know we bounced around on a few things, but I think it's been helpful for our audience. Even if you're already doing all this stuff, it's still nice to have a little reminder of how important some of these things are. And maybe you can take that 10% of the time verification of your estimate versus actuals and bump it up to 20. Baby steps. We're all busy, but baby steps. Make it a priority and you'll get there. Any final piece of advice? Anything you want to throw in here before we sign off?
I don't know, man. I just want to, I just go back to like how people are so, how very few people truly are job costing and are waiting for their accountant to tell them what to do. And like, I know if I was in a business owner's shoes of $1 million business, maxed out, not sure how to simplify my life or get a system and process in place or how to become more profitable or next stage of growth. Job costing is your source of data. With data, you can make logical decisions like it's cheaper for me to pay that $150 delivery fee instead of sending my guy out there to do it. That data is what gives you the freedom to make decisions without second guessing yourself. And the other thing is like this whole idea of R&D, rob and duplicate. This is a system that's been honed through 15 years of mistakes, tweaking. That didn't work. Let's try this. If you're in your first year of business, first 5 years, first 10 years, just take the thing and use it. Like rob and duplicate.
I like that. Rob and duplicate. I hadn't heard that one. I like that one. All right. Wes, thanks a lot. For everyone out there listening, thanks for hanging out with us for another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. Until next time, work hard, pave harder, and we'll see you next week.
Peace, guys. It's good talking.